In this episode, we're going to be talking about why it's important to trust your gut instinct and what are the repercussions when you don't. We're also going to talk about toxic relationships, not necessarily with partners, but with friends too. Hello and welcome to this week's episode. And this is a really special episode because over the last few weeks, I've realised that menopause, marriage and motherhood is kind of an old me. And what my focus is now, particularly after what's happened in the last 12 months, which, if you haven't listened to last week's episode, I suggest you go back and listen to last week's episode because that will give you a summary of what's been happening in my life over the last 12 months. But what I've realised is that this is now life after menopause. I am thoroughly postmenopausal and very glad for it. I cannot tell you how nice it is to be post-menopause because there's just so many more things available. And you know what? You give a lot less hoots about what anybody thinks. And you also, it's really interesting because you also get a lot more clarity on things that don't work in your life, things that maybe you've tolerated for a very long time. And now you're looking at them and going, maybe I should have stopped tolerating that possibly a decade ago, maybe more. And that's what I want to focus on moving into the future. It's those things, those issues, those concerns, those little niggles that we tolerate and we don't quite give up. So that's what we're going to be focusing on in the future. One of the surprising things that's happened for me this year is when I looked at the top 5 episodes for last year, 4 of the most downloaded episodes were actually my episodes where I was sharing what was going on in my life and what was happening with things. And that was a real shock. So I do want to share more. And I'm also aware that I find it very difficult, not least of which because I don't want to name anybody. I don't want to cause anybody any problems because I've said this, that they did this, and it's from my perspective. It's not necessarily, well, it definitely won't be from their perspective. And I don't want to change who anybody is in anybody else's eyes. So that causes a bit of problems because that means I can't share anything. So I do want to share myself and I do want to share what's going on with my life, and I'm going to find it quite difficult, and I'm still going to do it anyway because that's what we got to do. Just going back 2 steps because I kind of skimmed over it. Why was it a surprise that 4 of the 5 most downloaded episodes were what was going on in my life? I think I'm a bit shocked that people would be interested in what was going on for me. And having said that, I'm also kind of aware that stuff always happens in my life. Always. I've always got a million things going on and I like it that way. It's always been that way. I enjoy it. But it's always a surprise to me that anybody else would be interested in what's going on in my life. And yet we got the Kardashians and stuff. So obviously we're all interested in what everybody else is doing. So I do want to share more of what's happening. And I also want to bring to the forefront the things that are important to me, the things that I'm discovering and learning at the moment. So let's do a quick recap of the last 12 months because I need to bring you up to speed in case you haven't listened to the other episodes. But basically in the last 12 months, I separated, I sold my house, I bought a new house, and I moved house. And my old house sale fell through the day before settlement, and I had to rent the house. My new house, which was all sorts of problems. Anyways, managed to sell it eventually. Had a month off, and then I launched my podcasting business where I set up other people's podcasts for them, and I used a friend and a marketing company to market the business. And 3.5 months into their marketing, so they started 1st of August. This is middle of November. I realized that the marketing wasn't going that well, and I wanted to stop the relationship and take over the marketing myself. And I'm sharing this with you because one of the big lessons for me this year has been to look at the people in my life. And what I find myself doing, it's really fascinating, because what I find myself doing is when you meet somebody or when you're talking to somebody, and I'll say to myself, oh, but they're a nice person. They're all right, really. No, that's just the way they are. There's nothing wrong with them. Yeah, they're okay. And I do that with so many people in my life. I've realized that there are other people whose presence that I'm really clear I don't want in my life. But there's so many people that I just kind of tolerate because there's no massive reason to exclude them from my life, or I can't justify to myself just saying, look, it's not for me, I'm walking away from the relationship. There are so many people that I've done that with. I realized that this person doing the marketing, who I'd actually become what I would consider close friends with, was actually not acting in my best interests at all. So the marketing had two objectives. One of them was to increase my podcast downloads, and the other one was to get clients for the podcasting business. My downloads dropped by 40% over the time that they were doing the marketing. And we had one inquiry on the business in 3.5 months. To put it, I spent a long time in a lot of angst about this, because is it me? Is the universe telling me that I need to do something different? Is this not a good business? Is this not something that people want? Is it time for me to stop my podcast? Is it just that nobody's interested in it and I'm rubbish at podcasting? What is going on? And there's been several lessons from that. And one of them I learned recently in the last few days. When that company redid my website, one of the things they didn't do was transfer over the website that hosts my podcast feed. So since July, my podcast feed has been pointing to a 404 page not found error. So unless you actually click on the link that I put up every week, you click on any other link, it's not going anywhere. You can't search back through my podcast. You can't do anything. They appear on all the players, but that's the only place you can find them. And that, I suspect, is why my podcast downloads have dropped. Now, they should have done that, corrected that back in July. They didn't. And I picked up on this in September and brought it up. Oh my God, this hasn't happened. Go and sort that out. And they were like, yeah, we'll go and sort it out. We did this already. It must be a glitch in the system, blah, blah, blah. Still hadn't been sorted. I sorted it out yesterday, so I know it can be done. And I know it's not that difficult because I am not crash hot at doing the technical stuff on websites. So if I can do it, it can be done quite easily. A couple of emails, bit of help from SiteGround, and it was sorted. So it's been a lesson for me over the last couple of months in particular. I think I knew on some level that me and this person weren't aligned. And because that person had not done anything in particular to upset me or anything against me or done anything to justify me not having them in my life, I left them in my life. But I knew that they weren't aligned. And it's like this last year has been about learning to trust my instinct about people. I think that's what I'm trying to say. I've known since I met her that we weren't fully aligned, but I kept her in my life because I didn't have a reason not to, as opposed to listening to what I knew and letting her go. And one of the other things that I realized in all this is that those people that I'd kept in my life because they're okay have all, without exception, turned out to be toxic narcissists. Say that hand on heart. And that's been a real shock that it was so hidden in plain sight. And the other thing that's been a big lesson for me is I do not like it when people don't get lessons. if I say something to you, and if somebody says to me, Karen, you're behaving in this way and the impact of that is blah, 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 and it upsets people and it causes things, I will take that on board. I might not do anything about it, but I will look at myself and take it on board. That is one of the things that I am really passionate about. And my poor children, I've got to say, my poor children have had this drummed into them since the year dot. So I get very upset when I try to give that kind of feedback to somebody else and they don't take it. And what I noticed is that my response to that is to keep going. I do not give up. I will keep going till you get that lesson. And it becomes really unpleasant for both myself and the other person. And right now, I feel like I am banging my head on a narcissistic door with absolutely no impact whatsoever. And I've got to decide whether it's worth the pain for myself, whether I give it up and just walk away. I've done as much as I can, but I do not like giving up. They will get the lesson. I'm going to convince myself now. I'm pretty sure at some level they've got the lesson. I just want them to acknowledge it and then I'll be able to walk away. I don't like the fact that they've not said sorry and they've not acknowledged that their marketing campaign was a failure and that they didn't do things on the website. I just want them to acknowledge that. And I don't think they're going to, because they're a narcissist. So I suppose what I'm saying is there somebody in your life? Where else in our lives do we have these people that we sort of tolerate because they're kind of okay? But in reality, they're toxic for us. They might not be toxic for anybody else, but they're toxic for us. And really, that's all that matters. So that's kind of where I'm at for the moment. And I will share more of this kind of stuff because here's the thing, right? The more we share ourselves, this is my perspective on life, right? The more we share ourselves, the more permission we give other people to experience the same thing, to validate their feelings and to validate their experience. And the more we do that, the more connection we have with other people. And that's a big missing. And that's what I want to create. What I've always wanted to create is connection with people and to validate their experiences. I am quite sure, for example, that this person who was doing my marketing has a completely different opinion to me than I have of myself. I have no doubt. Their version of events is totally different to mine. That's fine. That's completely valid in their world. And we all need to share ourselves so that none of us feel isolated and we feel more connected with everyone and connected with each other, and that it's okay to have the experiences we're having, to feel the way we're feeling. And sorry, the thought that passed through my mind just then was, do you know what? It is okay to wish that you never see that person again. And even on occasion when maybe I've had a sleepless night, to hope that they burn in a fiery hell. That's okay. That's not who I am, but it's understandable. And that's where I'm going with myself, is being okay with whatever I feel. Not hang on to it, not be that person, just allow the thought to come and go. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please give me your feedback. I hope you've got something from it. But I'll talk to you next time. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Life After Menopause. We look forward to talking to you next week. Make sure you connect with us on social media and click on the subscribe button so that you don't miss another episode. See you next time.